Like I said, Thor's legendary bloodlust and wrath will be aimed at Kratos and Atreus, referred to disparagingly by Mimir as the biggest butchering bastard in the Nine Realms. Thor earned his title as one of the most powerful Aesir gods by wiping out nearly all the giants at Odin's command. Now, if this doesn't sound like the Thor you know, I seriously recommend picking up Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology for a primer on this Thor. Let's just say he's something else entirely.
Is he though?
And speaking of giants, like I said, they're not exactly the Allfather Odin's favourites, and he has long been at war with them. He had Thor try and wipe them out, and he imprisoned his other son Tyr for helping them. Now, we believed Tyr to be dead in the first game, but it looks like we're going to be meeting him in Ragnarok. The giants had the gift of foresight, and at the end of God of War, Kratos uncovered a prophecy where it was revealed that his wife was actually a giant named Laufey. Not only is Atreus part giant, he was also given the name Loki at birth, and is somehow involved in Ragnarok. So much for not getting involved in the Aesir's affairs.
You're next! I'll rip your head off!
With regard to Atreus, Santa Monica Studio revealed that, like most young people, he wants to understand who he is more than anything. In this case, he wants to understand who he could be. The mystery of Loki's role in the upcoming conflict is something that Atreus cannot let go of. He wants to keep his family safe, but Atreus also doesn't want to stand by and do nothing while conflict consumes the Nine Realms.
My story doesn't end hiding in these woods. I should be out there, finding out who I am, who Loki is.
But the usually bloodthirsty Kratos seems to wish to take a different path. A line from the game's description insinuates that he is intent on helping to spare Atreus from the bloody lessons he learned from his conflict with gods. He wants to keep his son safe, above all, and their confrontation with Balder has vindicated the belief that only tragedy will come from further entanglements with the Aesir. Together, Kratos and Atreus will have to make a choice about which path they will take. Whatever they choose will define the fate of all those living in the Nine Realms as Ragnarok approaches. Which leads us quite nicely into combat. 2018's God of War was praised for its crunchy combat mechanics and systems, and Sony Santa Monica has pledged to carry forward that spirit and tradition. As a team, we've worked hard to take our learnings from God of War 2018 and improve upon combat to feel fresh yet familiar. With God of War Ragnarok, one of our main goals was to push player choice in combat. Whether it's through hard-hitting combos, a mastery of elements, or clever defensive tactics, you will find plenty of opportunities to fight alongside our duo in a way that feels uniquely expressive. Which is great because not only do you have gods on your tail, but the other enemies in Ragnarok will be harsher and more varied, with Kratos and Atreus set to take on a host of new creatures from across Norse mythology. Some of the new enemies revealed so far include the Stalker and the Dreki. Whereas 2018's God of War allowed players to visit 6 of the 9 realms, Ragnarok goes further and takes you to all 9. This includes Vanaheim, Svartalfheim, and Asgard, which were not in the first game. New areas from previous locations have been added to Ragnarok as well. According to Santa Monica Studios, exploring the realms will take you everywhere from verdant, otherworldly jungles to intricate subterranean mining networks. This next installment in the series will bring you a more diverse, beautiful, and mysterious variety of locations than in any other God of War game. Christopher Judge and Sonny Suljic returned to voice Kratos and Atreus, while Ryan Hurst, who played Opie in Sons of Anarchy, has joined the cast as Thor. Leia de Leon Hayes plays Angerboda, while Ben Prendergast portrays Tyr. Richard Schiff will be playing Odin. Returning from the 2018 game is Bear McCreary to once again compose the music. The new trailer from the PlayStation Showcase includes a tease of the new tunes, and according to McCreary's Twitter, it includes a significant new character theme, which sounds both very ominous and very exciting. Cory Barlog directed 2018's God of War, as well as 2007's God of War 2, but he's not returning to direct the sequel. Stepping in is Eric Williams, a veteran of the series, to direct Ragnarok. Speaking to VGC, Williams said, "It's always been a tradition here at Santa Monica to change the directors across the games. We've had really good success with that. Cory is the only repeat director, and rightfully so. He's damn good at what he does." Cory Barlog added, "The important thing for us is to be able to get a fresh perspective each time, but also a fresh pair of legs in the sense that you're really exhausted at the end of finishing one of these things. So you've got to con somebody else into doing it."
Now, you are ready.
God of War Ragnarok is planned for PS5, but it's also coming to PS4. The The news of a previous gen version was quietly shared via a Q&A with Herman Holst, the head of PlayStation Studios. At the September PlayStation Showcase, Sony confirmed that Ragnarok will be released across PS5 and PS4, although there is no word yet on any big differences between the editions that might exist. And what about PC? Well, this is all speculative right now. Given Sony's recent track record of slowly bringing some of its biggest PlayStation games to PC, it does make sense to question the possibility for a PC version of God of War Ragnarok. Sony also recently acquired the PC port specialist Nix's software, fueling rumours that it might bring more of its first-party games to PC to help expand their audience. While a PC edition of Ragnarok hasn't been confirmed yet, Holst mentioned in an interview on the PlayStation blog that the company continues to further invest in the PC space. But if it's anything like previous Sony releases on PC, it's likely not to come to the platform for some time if it ever does. We'll let you know when we do. If you're interested in a behind-the-scenes look at how the 2018 God of War was made, check out our episode of Audio Logs, where game director Cory Barlog breaks down one of the most pivotal scenes, how it was created, and the crucial gameplay mechanic that was almost cut from the game.
And we really had to figure out how to take the old moves and make them work much better in this camera angle.
For more God of War, make sure to like this video and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.
You'll get your answer soon enough. Well, some of them.
From Software's games have always made you feel small in many ways. They tell you that you're worthless, a plague-ridden rat, or a cursed undead, unfit even to be cinders. They ask you to navigate unflinching, brutal worlds and pit you against enemies that systematically dismantle your ego. Elden Ring maintains the nail-biting combat and air of mystery that has distinguished From Software's Soulsborne games, but it's elevated to new heights by the studio's interpretation of what an open-world game can be. Having brought down the first Elden Lord, Godric, the breadth of the world, and the way in which From Software has applied its signature style to an open world, was on full display, reinforcing how insignificant I really was, and driving home the magnitude of the task that still awaited me. Standing on the edge of a cliffside in Liurnia of the Lakes, the area beyond Godric's arena, I took in the world laid out in front of me. The enormous Erd tree casting brilliant golden beams of light onto the land that exists in its shadow. The sharp peaks of a distant mountain that looked like claws tearing at the sky. A castle standing proudly amidst ruins. A forest blanketed in an ominous fog. It was all overwhelming, and none of the hardships I'd experienced in Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne or Sekiro have come close to making me feel as small. At the same time, I was overcome with excitement for what the lands between had in store for me, and all the seemingly insurmountable battles awaiting, and it did not disappoint. Elden Ring is From Software's crowning achievement in world design, epic in scale and scope. But what makes it special isn't just how visually stunning it all is, or that its open world is vast, rich in detail, and teeming with possibilities. Instead, it's how the studio has applied its own esoteric design principles to deliver an experience that feels fresh, elegant, and uniquely From Software. The game's core pillars are built on the same strong action and role-playing foundations as previous titles, while offering more freedom to explore than ever before. Elden Ring is an open world game entirely in a category of its own. That delicate orchestration of highs and lows and the build-up and release of tension that From Software has mastered, coupled with the thrill of free-form exploration and discovery, is an intoxicating cocktail of game design. A key part of From Software's design ethos is to strip down to the essentials, and in Elden Ring that process strengthens exploration and discovery, the heart and soul of the experience. The studio's games typically give the player very little while asking a lot, and Elden Ring is the most obtuse and demanding of its games so far. This is largely because everything you've come to expect from modern day open world games is absent. For instance, there's no map until you find an item that reveals the topography of a region. Even then, the points of interest in that region aren't marked until you've been there and seen them. There is no minimap, just a compass that shows the cardinal directions and any waypoints you've placed. Areas you go to won't be gated depending on your level. There's no clear indication on when you should go to key locations. The best you get is at the sites of grace, which function as rest points in the same way that bonfires, lanterns or idols did in other titles. At each of these sites is a dim trail of golden light pointing in the general direction of something. Perhaps it's the next milestone on your quest, or maybe it's just another area that has a dungeon. The only way to find out is to make the journey. The challenge for From Software lies in the friction between the studio's design hallmarks and the expected conventions of a genre filled with games that try to be all things to everyone. And although the execution is an unmitigated success, one thing's for sure: Elden Ring is not a smooth-edged, one-size-fits-all kind of experience that will accommodate everyone. Instead, it's unrelentingly opaque, relishes in the savagery of confronting players with unfavorable odds, and delights in watching the ensuing struggle. Elden Ring's gameplay will feel familiar to those with experience of previous From Software games. The tried and true formula of measured third-person combat against enemies that are swift to punish foolhardiness is both as thrilling and as nerve-wracking as ever. From Software has added some new gameplay wrinkles to its Soulsborne formula this time. Most notable is a jump, which has been pulled out from the more dynamic movement style of Sekiro. This is useful not just for traversal, but also for performing a leaping strike that can break through an enemy's defense and create a critical strike opportunity. Another new mechanic is the ability to strike back after blocking an enemy's attack with a heavy counter, dealing a good amount of damage. The heavy counter has some of the satisfaction of Bloodborne's gunshot and visceral combo, though it's not as gratifyingly dramatic. While it's easy to rely on it, a great deal of strategy is still needed to perfectly execute it, as an enemy's quick follow-up strike could cut you down before you've initiated the counter. The new gameplay mechanics certainly provide more options against tough foes, but they still require the player to know their opponent and carefully select their moments. The last major addition is Spirit Ashes, which allow the player to summon upgradable AI-controlled fighters to their side. Of course, there are restrictions around summoning them, as Spirit Ashes can only be used in specific locations and only once per life. They're also susceptible to being killed by more powerful enemies, making them better equipped for pulling aggro than securing victories. These kind of thoughtful tweaks extend to the checkpointing system, which is a little more lenient to accommodate the open nature of the game. Instead of being returned to a site of grace when killed, the open world is littered with small statues called Stakes of Marika. These can usually be found around particularly challenging areas, whether that's because there's a group of enemies in a fortified location or a singular mini-boss that must be faced in one of the many heart-pounding, soul-crushing and utterly confidence-destroying encounters. This addition is more of a necessity for taking out the frustrations of having to travel large distances in an open world. The challenges the Stakes of Marika precede are no less forgiving. Elden Ring is undoubtedly difficult, much harder than any of From Software's previous games, and while a great deal of that is owed to the challenging bosses and enemies, a significant amount is also because of the freedom the game offers the player. It doesn't tell you where to go in any way, so it can be very easy to find yourself in places that are too difficult for you to navigate. Instead, it just trusts you to assess the situation and consider your own capabilities, both as a player and a character. Then decide if you should return to a place that is more manageable and continue building your character up to come back later. Some, like me, will fall hopelessly in love with the thrill of blindly wandering into a corner of the map and being ruthlessly murdered for hours on end, just to walk away with little more than the satisfaction that I kept picking myself up and eventually emerge victorious, albeit battered and bruised. Others, however, will find the idea of navigating a perilous catacomb down to its deepest depths while braving all manner of horrifying creatures just for a few measly crafting materials to be the epitome of unrewarding. But either way, there's a boldness to the approach that deserves to be respected. The Lands Between is no less content rich than many of its open world contemporaries, and it offers much to do. In fact, it's an immensely large game that is bursting with activities to undertake. In the starting area of Limgrave alone, there are numerous caves, tunnels, ruins, catacombs, shacks, and encampments to find. These may not always lead to meaningful progress in becoming an Elden Lord or advancing a key questline, but none of it felt superfluous or boring. This is because what these activities offer is far more meaningful. A gameplay loop that sparks a curiosity to uncover the secrets that the Lands Between hold, and the raw satisfaction of discovery. Discovering things to do is as intensely satisfying as doing them, and that is what Elden Ring is predicated upon. The same sense of growth and satisfaction that comes from conquering Lordran or becoming completely at home in Yharnam is present as you brave the Lands Between. What once struck fear into your heart becomes trivial as you venture deeper and spend ruins to level up and grow stronger. It shouldn't come as a surprise that a From Software game isn't quick to dish out rewards and praise for tasks you undertake. Instead, the most valuable rewards are intangible and internal, a sense of personal growth that comes from your mastery of mechanics and domination of the world's vicious denizens, or the feeling of journeying through this inhospitable land as a cartographer, poking into its various nooks and crannies and seeing what lurks there. There are countless moments that will catch you off guard and fuel that desire to explore. On one occasion, I travelled to a remote shack where a war master had taken up residence. He had always been there, but this was my first time visiting at night, and he wasn't in the shack. When I approached it, a cloud of red appeared, and from within, a knight menacingly stepped out to do battle. It proceeded to wipe the floor with me, but considering it was telekinetically wielding a large spectral blade, I'd say it had a bit of an advantage. This was one of many moments just like it that made my mind race with possibilities. With a world as vast as the land betweens that shifts dramatically depending on the time of day, what else was out there for me to see? Elden Ring is a game where the possibilities feel endless, and I felt driven to chase them all down, as each one offers a memorable moment and made the world feel richer. Freeform exploration isn't completely new, and the proverbial elephant in the room in that regard is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's easy to draw comparisons between Elden Ring and Nintendo's acclaimed open world Zelda, but what sets the two apart is a greater sense of authorship around the things that you can stumble upon in the lands between, and an overall cohesion between the open world and these activities. Elden Ring is seamless, whether you're delving into a cliffside cave or breaching a massive castle front, and in spite of the vast diversity amongst these locations. Although there are occasional breaks to make a transition, these are just for a few specific set piece locations that are elaborate dungeons with ambitious design ideas. Think of it as going from Hemwick Charnel Lane to Cainhurst Castle in Bloodborne. While the open world represents a newer Soulsborne gameplay experience that prioritizes freedom and player agency, there are also numerous key locations that are more in line with the enclosed, directed areas of previous games. Stormvale Castle, Redmane Castle, and Raya Lucaria, among others, are where From Software continues to do what it does best: create visually arresting locations that are intricately designed to loop and weave in on themselves in a way that makes navigating through them as joyous as it is perilous. Each of the key locations in the game has a distinct atmosphere, aesthetic, and vibe, and I found it impossible not to marvel at the craftsmanship on show. This is the kind of game where you have to stop to see the sights, even when the sights are grotesque creatures that make you worry about the minds that created them. There are areas of Elden Ring's world that feel as genuinely terrifying as Bloodborne, like Caelid, where the river runs the color of copper, fissures erupt like bursting arteries, trees are shriveled and curled like the hands of an ancient witch, and a blood-red sky stretches as far as the eye can see. But hop on Torrent, your spectral steed, and ride west to Limgrave, and you'll realize that the lands between isn't entirely a world on the brink of collapse with life about to be snuffed out. It's very much alive, and that much is evident from the verdant fields, bustling wildlife, and picturesque vistas. If you're in the right place at the right time, you might even find yourself in a moment of serenity as the light of morning dawn sweeps over a forest and trees gently sway in the wind. The most impressive part of it all is how it coalesces in a single landmass that the player can travel across, despite the fact that each area looks and feels like it could be from an entirely different game. Needless to say, Elden Ring is a gorgeous game, and a spectacular feast for the eyes. Much has been made of George R.R. Martin's involvement, but there's little in Elden Ring that stands out as having his fingerprints on it. From the characters to the narrative and the way it's delivered in broken pieces for the player to fill the gaps in, it's unmistakably Hidetaka Miyazaki and the From Software team, and it's all fascinating. To talk about it would be to deprive you and the larger Soulsborne community of one of the greatest joys of a new From Software game, so I won't do that. But it's safe to say that the expansive world, which George R.R. Martin helped lay the foundation for, is filled with memorable characters. Some have mysterious motivations, while others have tragic fates and somber backstories. There's clashing ideologies, divine entities, and clandestine groups vying for power. All the pieces and item descriptions needed to supercharge the From Software lore video industrial complex are there. I have just a small grasp of everything going on, and I cannot wait for the larger community to get involved so we can all piece it together as a collective. Elden Ring is a game that I firmly believe was designed to be a communal experience. not because it has online co-op, but because there are so many things in the game to discover that it will undoubtedly encourage speaking feverishly into the wee hours of things seen and places discovered. The community that has already emerged around the game reminds me of when Demon's Souls was first released, and players took to forums to share their experiences and guide each other through the game. That kind of galvanization around a game is truly special, and only possible here because of From Software's decision to pull back on what it tells the player, while trusting that they will find their own sense of adventure, chase their curiosities, and engage in jolly cooperation. In a genre that's become wrought with bloated and over-designed games, Elden Ring is defiantly contrarian in almost every way. Its commitment to design by subtraction and to placing the responsibility of charting a path through its world entirely on the player makes it stand head and shoulders above other open world titles. Elden Ring takes the shards of what came before and forges them into something that will go down in history as one of the all-time greats. A triumph in design and creativity, and an open world game that distinguishes itself for what it doesn't do as much as what it does.
Vita means life. It means to be a Vita Islander. It means to be a part of a cult following that believed in this little machine more than the makers themselves did. And I was not one of them. Cue the booze. But that doesn't mean I wasn't always curious. I just missed the boat to Vita Island, a place in which many people are still abandoned to this day.
Everyone has left Vita Island. The people on Vita Island are trapped on Vita Island.
So I might be 10 years late, but better late than never to see what this thing is all about the people love so damn much. This is 10 years later with the Vita. First, my journey with the Vita begins with not having one, but thankfully I knew again.
Hi.
What are you doing with this?
I'm making a 10-year retrospective from a dude who's never played it. Alright, love you. Bye, 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 bye.
Oh, yeah. When I finally got it in my hands, I was hoping to boot it up to a bunch of exclusive Vita games I couldn't play anywhere else.
I did not know Power Stone was on this dude.
Instead, I was greeted with mostly PS1 games like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy, Vagrant Story, and Castlevanias. There were the usual games I was familiar with like Danganronpa and Virtue's Last Reward, but then there was also Persona 4 Golden. But why play some beloved game like Persona when I could play the real Sony flagships like Uncharted and Killzone? And I admit now, that was my first mistake. I booted up Uncharted Golden Abyss and it certainly looked the part, but it was also accompanied with what felt like forced touch controls and aiming with the back and gyro that made me feel like an idiot. Killzone was basically the exact same experience, except the shooting wasn't the most comfortable thing for me on that size device. I ended up doing the claw thing quite a bit to hit the other buttons, and yeah, just I mean, they certainly followed through with that high production value Sony stamp of approval, but I couldn't help feel that these were being muzzled by Vita's gimmicky features, a lot of which had me holding and using the Vita in ways that just felt incredibly unnatural. I knew somewhere underneath these funky controls that there were good games, I just didn't have the patience to find them. And, I mean, how could I have not? I've never had this thing, I never owned this thing, I just knew it had these dual touchscreens and all these other features and functions, so it was only natural that I wanted to see what those first-party Sony developers that are so prestigious in what they do could do with so many, you know, fun and touchy thingamadudes. They look beautiful for what it's worth. It wasn't until along that I naturally just found myself turning to the games I already knew on the device, stuff like Power Stone and Tekken 6, and in the process continued to neglect Persona 4 Golden, despite it being installed just ready to go, staring me right in the eyes. I admit now, that is my second mistake. In the matter of days, the Vita had found a place at the end of my desk where it began to collect dust while I played other games on my Switch. One of them, ironically, a popular visual novel that saw its American debut on the Vita, The House in Fata Morgana. My first impressions of this beloved device, at least right out of the box, were far from enticing. But I knew that what I had seen was only a breath of what it had to offer. I knew that I was getting a very narrow lens into this, so I needed to know more. I needed the full picture. I didn't even know this thing's history, honestly. The Vita came out here in the States in February 2012, somewhere between the release of the 3DS and the Wii U. And well, I chose the things on either side of the Vita, with only one of those things actually doing okay out of the full roster of that stuff. Sony's mission after the incredibly successful PSP was to meld big budget game experiences into the handheld, and with it, for some reason, packed in was a bunch of features. It had some novel stuff like having dual analog sticks, an OLED screen, and gyro motion. It also had outward and inward facing cameras, and for some reason, not just a front, but a back touchscreen too. Still, at first, when it came out, it was pretty successful. Despite the gimmicks, it showed a promising prospect for its future. Like, at first, yeah, maybe most people didn't understand why it needed two touchscreens, and I'm sure the back touchscreen also boosted the cost of it being made, but additionally, you had to use a proprietary PS Vita memory card, which was a hidden cost for owners, and they were expensive. While it sold okay in Japan, here in the States, sales began to slow down real fast after the console's release, and a lot of the heavy-hitting studios decided to move on from the device, including its maker, Sony. Only 2 years after its release, Sony pivoted to try giving it multiple uses rather than more games, like giving it remote play for the PS4 and PS TV, which was a companion device to play Vita games on your TV. The Switch before the Switch, except you didn't dock it. Still, pretty novel. I give them credit. They were like a little ahead of the curve there. In fact, 2014 was the last time the console got a major first-party release, which was Freedom Wars, Sony's answer to the absence of Monster Hunter on the device, which had seen that franchise live prosperly. Is that a word? Live fruitfully on the 3DS instead. So when the Ubisofts and EAs and Sony stepped out, the indies stepped in, and games like Ollie Ollie, Hotline Miami, and Fez suddenly found a new home on this thing. And the people who bought it and loved it were now tasked with carrying its legacy, despite all of its major support abandoning them. And thus, the Vita Islanders were born.
It's over. The ship has sailed. Everyone has left Vita Island. The people on Vita Island are trapped on Vita Island.
While doing research, I kept coming across the hashtag Vita Islanders, a hashtag spawned from the Vita's #1 fan, Greg Kinda Funny Miller, the king of the Vita. Or at least that's how I view him. Because he just loves that thing, and he'll tell you that he loves it. He'll make sure you know you're in where you stand with him when you haven't played it. I would know.
Greg, I'm sorry, but I've never played the Vita until now.
And what a surprise. Where were you 10 years ago? That's when we needed you. You all come around now and you're like, oh, it's a great Persona machine. Oh, Freedom Wars seemed really cool. Oh my God, this is where I should have been playing Hotline Miami the whole time. You want a pat on the back. You want everybody to show up, watch your little video, read your little feature. Because 10 years, you find Jesus later. It doesn't help. The Vita's dead, and it's because of you. Oh, the Steam Deck's coming. Wow-wee, zow-wee. I can play indies in a fucking giant Game Gear. The Vita was better than that, and you knew it was.
I got Tearaway.
Tearaway's real good. Tearaway's a real good one, yeah.
Clearly, people were very passionate about this thing, and I started to fear that I would regret at least not trying to understand that. So, I picked it back up. I began playing it constantly, in meetings while I pretended to listen to Jessie while she rambled about PlayStation All-Stars.
We can't be Super Smash Brothers, so you can't knock people off the stage. So hitting people built up a meter.
I even took it with me on the stationary bike while I played Gravity Rush and Hotline Miami. Then I finally came around to Tearaway, the first game that really showed the potential for all of Vita's gimmicks, but in the best way possible. It was the only thing I played that really demonstrated a bespoke experience only available to the Vita. But there was still one last game on this device that lingered in the shadows, installed and ready to go at any moment, that I knew I would have to play at one point to truly understand what it is that makes this console so special to so many people. So I finally booted up Persona 4 Golden. Playing Persona 4 Golden was the first time I felt that I could really put myself in the shoes of someone who this device meant a lot to. I'm only a few hours in at this point, but there's been a string of murders. There's this whole concept of the midnight channel, like looking into your TV at midnight to see possible next victim, as well as this overarching theme of a big corporate business coming in and hurting independent businesses around it, and like how all these things are playing into each other. I should have played this first. This is very much a Kurt thing. Murders, detectives, spooky stuff at midnight. And you're right, Greg. This is a wonderful Persona machine. And it's not so much just Persona 4 specifically, but it's when I began really seeing what the Vita offered that other devices just didn't at the time. I picked this thing up so fixated on trying to understand all its features and bells and whistles, convinced I'd find some justification for all of it, but I never did. But that's because, from the start, I was looking in the wrong place. Considering that this game wasn't really available anywhere else at the time, I can really imagine someone losing hours and hours and hours to this game on this device in their hands, and I can really kind of understand why this would have been special to someone, why this thing would have been important. I'm getting it. It's clicking. It's clicking. And that's when it really sunk in, that this thing, upon its release, really didn't know what it was. But its identity, in the end, was informed by its players. When this thing first came out, it was supposed to be Sony's answer to AAA gaming in the mobile space. But in reality, it became the indie buddy, the PS1 pal, the go-to machine for non-AAA titles. Something that the Switch is for a lot of people today, including me. You. Emails interrupting. God. I don't regret waiting all this time to have played the Vita. In fact, if I'm being completely honest, after I finish Persona 4 Golden, I don't know if I'll ever touch this again, unless someone sends me a copy of Freedom Wars or Touch My Katamari. Then maybe I'll consider it. I'm not some Vita Islander all of a sudden, and besides, I don't think anyone that's on Vita Island would want me there now anyways. But I'm glad I got to spend time with this thing and see it beyond what was there at face value, what was there beyond what the AAA corner of the game industry gave it. I got to see a glimpse into a device that was held up by not the big leagues, but the indies, by the players. And that is what mattered. Like, that's what mattered looking at it. I know you're bitter and grumpy, Greg, that I wasn't there from the start, but now I can at least take a step back and understand why for so many people, Vita means life. Also, thank you to Tamar Hussein for letting me borrow this. It means a lot.
Horizon Forbidden West casts an imposing shadow with its sheer size and density, but it's ultimately the characters and stories you'll encounter that will drive you to explore its new frontier. The game is continually compelling, not because developer Guerrilla Games filled it with a huge amount of stuff to do, but because so much of that stuff is thoughtfully constructed and sometimes even emotionally engaging, instead of just feeling like items created to add as many map markers to a world as possible. Forbidden West picks up almost immediately after the end of the original Horizon and its DLC add-on, Frozen Wilds, and it expects you to be very familiar with protagonist Aloy's adventures from back in 2017. It's set in the distant future after the world as we know it has ended and humans have reverted to a tribalistic society scattered across the ruins of the United States. And roaming all around the world are giant robotic animals, some as big as dinosaurs that kill humans on sight. Although Aloy defeated the rogue artificial intelligence Hades in the first game, the damage it did to the planet's biosphere means she's still hunting ancient tech to fix the problem. That takes her into the aforementioned Forbidden West in hopes of stopping a blight slowly crossing the land, threatening everyone with starvation. Since Aloy is a hunter in a hunter-gatherer society, collecting components to craft gear is a huge part of the experience, both for improving your equipment and for keeping you stocked in battle. Fighting huge, powerful machines is an exercise in identifying weak points and using various kinds of weapons and crafted ammo to strip away armor, while inflicting status effects such as setting enemies on fire, bathing them with corrosive acid, or freezing them to make their metal bodies more brittle. In a lot of ways, Forbidden West is pretty much the same as Zero Dawn, but follows the common sequel ethos of more and bigger, and a lot of the systems have been improved and expanded along the way. The Horizon games include climbing and environmental puzzles like those you'd see in Assassin's Creed or Uncharted, but in Forbidden West, much more of the world is scalable to let you reach the tops of mountains and ruins. Although this isn't The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and you can't climb everything. The freedom still improves traversal quite a bit, however, as does a powered grapple that you can use to reach specially marked points, a glider that lets you get down from those high places quickly, and the ability to swim and explore submerged environments. Your arsenal is larger, with a bunch of different kinds of weapons and elemental ammo types for straight combat, plus a series of craftable traps that you can use to take down machines and enemies before they spot you and have a chance to fight back. There are so many weapons and options that at times, it's hard to keep it all straight. 6 huge skill trees replace Zero Dawn's more modest 4, and each focuses on a single element of Aloy's arsenal, like traps, hacking, ranged combat, or stealth. The skills you can unlock include passive buffs and active special moves for each weapon type. There's also a new set of powerful Valor abilities that feel similar to an ultimate you might see in something like Overwatch or Apex Legends. One Valor ability lets you turn on active camouflage to go invisible and escape a bad situation. Another amps up your ability to slice off machine parts with your weapons. A third just creates a blast of electricity around you to send enemies flying. You can only equip one Valor ability at a time once you've unlocked it, and you have to charge it up through combat in order to use it. Again, it is a lot of stuff to keep track of, and the sheer volume works against Forbidden West as often as it works for it. For instance, you can buy weapons at every settlement, and each has a confusing name, like Shock Warrior Bow or Vanguard Hunter Bow. Most of the time, though, it's not super clear whether the Uncommon Shredder Launcher a merchant is selling is an upgrade over the Uncommon Shredder Launcher you already have. With so many ammo types in the game, you wind up carrying a bunch of weapons to cover all the elemental bases, while not really caring about any one of them. It's only late in the game, when you start to find some demonstrably sick weapons, that the arsenal feels like anything more than just a pile of junk in your backpack that you have to dig through until you find a bow that shoots the right kind of arrows for a given situation. The massive skill tree presents the same problem. Valor abilities can be great in a pinch, giving you some next level power when you really need it, but there are 2 to unlock on each skill tree, and the use cases for some aren't nearly as clear as Emergency Invisibility Cloak or 30 seconds of souped up arrows. The same goes for the huge number of special abilities, which amounts to 3 for each weapon type. Some are game-altering strategy centerpieces, like the knockdown shot, but others are easy to forget about, like a skill that makes your slingshot bomb more powerful if it bounces on the way to your target. In both cases, you'll probably unlock one or two you like and stick with those for most of the game. That's also an issue with the flow of combat. Forbidden West gives you more options in a fight, but it doesn't really change battles fundamentally from Zero Dawn. It just throws more ingredients into the stew. You'll usually sneak into a situation where a bunch of robots or humans are gathered, moving from tall grass patch to tall grass patch to either set traps, snipe enemies, or pull off sneaky executions. Once you've tipped off the machines to your presence, though, combat can feel flaily. Enemies have a tendency to attack quickly and relentlessly, and your only defensive recourse is a dodge roll to get out of harm's way. So when a scrapper or a wide mod charges, you're dodging attack after attack, hoping to get a little distance to draw an arrow and get a shot off before you go back to fleeing for your life. It's also frustrating trying to dig through your stupidly large bag of traps and potions to find an item that can heal you or cancel status effects as, again, you're being chased down by an apartment building sized predator. Aloy has so much gear and so many options at all times that a lot of Forbidden West's good ideas about combat, stealth, trapping, and crafting get in the way of one another. But when you're able to make Aloy's various tools and abilities come together, it creates some harrowing and exciting battles. That's especially true when you're able to make a plan with stealth, traps, and tactics and execute it. It helps that, while you fight a lot of battles alone, quite a few encounters will see you aided by other characters. Having an extra bow and more targets for machines to chase lessens the pressure, and characters routinely chuck Aloy extra ammo to keep the fight going. It's those other characters that will keep you going through Forbidden West, as much as the opportunity to explore a fascinating ruin or fell a rampaging Robo-T-Rex. Often, you'll meet up with someone from a local tribe who has a vested interest in checking out that long-dormant agricultural testing facility or space travel research lab, and it's in building relationships with those characters and learning about their various peoples that Forbidden West really shines, even if Aloy herself is kind of dull. Forbidden West puts Aloy in an almost Mass Effect-style position of building a team to help her save the world. About a third of the way into the game, you establish a stable base of operations, and characters both old and new become mainstays. You don't bring them out into the field as a unit like an RPG team, but you can head back to talk with them about what you learn and your experiences, and they'll often pair up with you at key moments or ask your help with side quests that are important to them. The group grounds Forbidden West's story and gives you a foothold in local events. Side quests are also populated by interesting people with relatable problems and motivations.
It'll blow all the others out of the forge. You have got to help me.
And Forbidden West does a great job of giving you things to do that don't feel like repetitions of the open world go here, get this quest template. Often, side quests involve several steps or multiple missions, forcing Aloy to intervene in local politics or help with a dire situation. And they're not always about combat. In one series of missions, you wind up interacting with the leaders of two desert villages, each with differing views about the future of the tribe and distrusting of the other. Both are likable but flawed characters, and as you spend a little time helping and getting to know both, you realize that neither is wholly right or wrong. The investment of time and the solid writing add stakes to the situation that keep you invested in its resolution. Forbidden West is full of moments where the game goes out of its way to put you in close contact with a side character for a bit, and then turns them into the fulcrum of an interesting quest. Paired with the stakes of the main story, this gives the whole game the feeling that you're not just running around doing errands and odd jobs. You're actually building important relationships with people you've come to know and respect. And while there are an absolute truckload of side quests, plus smaller jobs to do, many are well written and offer a deeper look into Forbidden West's world. Guerrilla is also usually good at keeping its various map-filling activities feeling fresh and diverse.
Looks like this door's locked. Maybe there's another way in.
The game contains a number of relic ruin sites in which you explore a decrepit ancient building looking for an artifact locked in a hard-to-reach place. There are a bunch of these, but I stopped to do each one because they're fun and complex climbing puzzles, and they're all very distinct from one another. The same goes for the tall necks, the giant robot dinosaurs that serve the map revealing function of towers in other open world games. Reaching the top of each lumbering robot is a puzzle unto itself. One is submerged in the ocean and requires you to find components to rebuild it, for instance, and another can't be reached until you knock it over by shooting it with giant ballistas. The general goal is always to get to the top of a tall neck, but each challenge is so different from the others that they're absolutely worth chasing down as soon as you reach a new area.
Well, like sending that data to other machines, but now it's mine.
The main story also has its share of standout moments. One portion concerns helping the leader of the Tanakh to put down a rebellion so he can make attempts at peace and cooperation with the tribes in the east. Another takes you into a submerged, underground Las Vegas Strip to help some salvagers realize their dream of elevating their traveling storytelling act with technological wonders. The story can be uneven at times, but it's often good at keeping the focus on stakes that feel like they actually matter to the people involved. The storytelling is aided by the fact that Forbidden West is absolutely gorgeous on PlayStation 5, in both its graphics and its performance mode. Everything from the characters and their intricately constructed armor, to the rusting ruins of cities with rebar jutting out of concrete, to the lush jungles and windswept deserts, is impressively detailed. Catching a sunrise over the farms of Plainsong or the waves of Landfall is legitimately beautiful, and the colorful, diverse locations offer vista after stunning vista everywhere you look. It's a very pretty game. Characters benefit from a great deal of strong voice work and what seems like an abundance of scanned facial performances, if not outright full motion capture.
With a hose to a
compressed air capsule, hammer and tongs.
What is this? What is happening here? What? Get over here.
You'll spend a large amount of time in conversations in Forbidden West, and in the main quest and big side quests, the characters are often compelling because their facial performances are so good. This has a drawback though. You'll definitely notice the less important folks who move like animatronics, and in some interactions on lesser missions, Aloy has a tendency to look all over the place, as if her animation isn't quite matched to that particular conversation or circumstance.
Maybe I can help?
For the big, important moments though, a ton of characterization and emotion comes through in the faces, and it makes the stories and emotional beats of the game all the more interesting. The vast size of Forbidden West also feels like it introduces a fair few technical issues beyond Aloy's occasional inability to make eye contact with less interesting characters. Especially when you're on a mount or looking over large distances, there can be some texture pop in, particularly with the architecture of settlements. The game crashed to the PlayStation dashboard on me a handful of times as I played through it, and a couple of times a quest couldn't be completed until I reloaded an earlier save. Aloy got stuck looting a chest or an enemy a few times, forcing me to roll back to an earlier save, and she got stuck in the sky and in the ground on a couple of occasions too. None of these issues were game-breaking for me, and Forbidden West autosaves liberally, so I never lost much, if any, progress. A Day 1 patch seems to have ironed out a few of the pre-release issues I experienced, but while some of them have been lessened, like the texture pop-in problem, they haven't been eliminated. Overall, though, Horizon Forbidden West does a lot more right than it does wrong. It might be jam-packed with stuff to see, do, know, and remember, but when its many systems come together, it can be a beautiful, exciting, and delightful open-world experience. The story that drives you through the frontier is often well told, and does well to center actual characters rather than audio logs. And while the map is littered with icons, it's much more often that they're fun, skillfully crafted diversions than random busywork to fill a checklist. There's a huge amount to see and do in Horizon Forbidden West, and the great majority of it is worth doing and seeing, thanks to strong writing, great visuals, and some marked improvements to the series' underlying ideas.
This is Lucy James, reading for reviewer Alex Goy. In Gran Turismo 7, the latest entry in the PlayStation's top flight race series, perfection isn't only famed producer Kazunori Yamauchi's aim, it swiftly becomes yours. It's been a quarter of a century since the real driving simulator that got petrol heads obsessed with lap times on the PS1 released, and it hasn't evolved massively. For better and for worse, it's strangely familiar, but it plays as close to driving a real car as you can get on a console and draws you in with challenges, physics, and luscious visuals. Gran Turismo's goal to be the best-looking driving sim out there hasn't been dropped. There are two display modes to choose from, Scapes mode and frame rate mode. On a PS5 connected to a 4K TV with ray tracing enabled, Scapes mode becomes a visual treat for snap-happy players and fans of custom creations. Everything looks smooth enough that you'll want to run your fingers across the glistening paint jobs. However, when you're racing, you'll want to have frame rate mode switched on. This keeps the game at a steady 60 frames per second, but does lose some visual flair. How much you'll care about that may be limited, as when you're racing, you'll likely only have eyes for the car in front, not how accurate the reflection of the advertisements you're blitzing past is on the hood. Even without ray tracing, the hyper-detailed in-car view shows bits of the dashboard reflected in the windshield, drawing your eye. It can be a bit distracting, but that's how real cars work. Gran Turismo 7's 420 plus car models are staggering. Not a switch out of place, nor an incorrect line to my experienced eyes. If you're into staring at cars, you really can't go wrong sniffing around Brand Central, the in-game location where you buy the majority of GT7's cars. It's here you'll notice something a bit strange though. While each model is impressive, many are a little on the old side. The Tesla Model S, for example, is the original pre-facelift car. Why have that when there's a fresh-faced plaid model on sale now? How come the most up-to-date road-going McLaren you can buy in the game, the 650S, went out of production half a decade ago? The cars that are there look incredible, but the vast majority are out of date. Some of the older cars are there for good reason. A classic Mustang is always a great time and belongs in Gran Turismo for the sake of being awesome. And saving credits to afford a legendary Aston Martin is an achievement to be celebrated, so it's not all "dude, where's my car?" GT7 has a charming story mode of sorts, the Cafe. It's here players will be steadily introduced to all the joys the game has to offer via Luca, the cafe's friendly owner. He provides you with menu books that set specific challenges, which unlock tracks, features, or cars to bolster your collection and collector level, which in turn increases as you collect cars and gains you more rewards. Unless the challenge is to go to a specific place, like the amusingly named Understeer tuning shop to fettle your car, or GT Auto for a new wing, chances are you'll find yourself in a race to win a car of some sort. In an attempt to humanize Gran Turismo, Polyphony's given Luca a cast of friends. Sarah guides you around the GT world, acting as something of a proxy. Car designers will appear at the cafe to tell you all about how great your car is. GT World Tour racers act as instructors on licensed tests, adding smiles to what used to be a fairly robotic process. They're all represented as faces in discs with text underneath. Unfortunately, the scripts they deliver go from a bit clunky to "I can smell the cheese from here." Players will amass the kind of car collection a millionaire would be proud of fairly quickly, but places to drive those cars can take a while longer to roll out because there are fewer tracks than cars. However, this ultimately is not a bad thing. The tracks take a while to learn anyway. Because of this, you never feel rushed to pick up too many things too quickly, though you don't get to spend too much time with your motors before moving on to the next set. Sometimes you'll be rewarded with a roulette ticket. These seem like a neat idea, but the promise of a shiny new car or a huge stack of credits seemed, in my case at least, to be a little more than dangled carrots to hook you, the actual prizes won being low value. Races go the usual Gran Turismo way. You start at the back and fight your way to the front. Races have a recommended PP, or performance point, rating to let you know how competitive your car needs to be. By sending whichever car you've chosen to race to understeer and buying choice toys, you can comically overpower your ride and pick off most of the field on the first lap. Like GT games of old, the pack at the rear is easy to take. A small gap leads you to another set. After another gap, you'll encounter the front runners, before having a mildly troubling fight for first. Why Gran Turismo insists on starting you at the back of the pack for each race is baffling. But for a one-off race, it's understandable for the occasional championships where you win or place highly in a previous race. That aside, the racing is still fun. AI competitors drive defensively and occasionally make mistakes. Each race does feel similar and occasionally rubber bandy, but there's enough challenge in there to make you return for more. License tests are back and are addictive, albeit occasionally frustrating little tasks that teach you the game's physics model. The way Gran Turismo handles is, as you'd hope after a quarter of a century of refinement, bang on. Barrel into corners with the throttle wide open and you'll understeer, lift off mid-corner and the rear will swing round. Depending on how many of the game's myriad modifications from understeer or GT Auto you've applied, it'll behave differently, but within the rules of GT7's physics. The same goes for inclement conditions. Not all circuits can have dynamic weather, but those that can are a different, broader kind of fun to play on. You'll first find your super slick race tyres, an expensive investment but a good way to up performance points fast, are now useless. You'll then either learn how to control a slide at speed or where the retry button is. The track will dry eventually, your palms, maybe not. Night driving's a blast, as are the astronomically accurate starscapes that keep the sky bright. While racing and collecting are the main focus, you'd be a fool to miss out on missions. These include a variety of different driving challenges, such as slipstreaming for speed, drag racing, or overtaking challenging opponents in a short slot of track. Like license tests, they can be frustrating, but you'll keep coming back for more. Similarly, the music rally function is a neat distraction from the main game. Drive quick enough to music so you don't run out of beats. You start with a set amount of beats that decrease with each, well, beat of the song you're listening to. Drive quick enough and you'll pick more up via gates on the track. Run out and it's game over, finish the whole song and you've won. Not a reason to buy it outright, but entertaining if you want something different. There's still no obvious damage to cars though. Yamauchi and the Polyphony team want racing clean, so cars don't need to get damaged, but it's 2022. If I have a prang, the game should know about it. Considering the level of detail that's gone into the rest of the game, it seems like something of a cop-out to not have any evidence of a crash, even cosmetic. Another thing that hasn't leapt to the next gen is the sound. 3D audio tech means you can hear more, but what you hear isn't edge of your seat thrilling. There are plenty of places to race in GT7, some based on real locations, some exclusive to the game. With 90 layouts and over 34 tracks to earn and explore, you shouldn't find yourself bored. Each track comes with its own challenges, not only in layout but in environmental changes as well. While you'll be concentrating on a race, it's a lot more exciting when the sun's out and the rain's at bay, as having more grip tends to make winning races easier. At the time of review, GT7's online mode, casual, ranked, or the meeting spaces, wasn't available, but if Polyphony's carrying over the GT Sport system, we've little to worry about. All your GT Sport data will be transferred, though sadly not your garage. As with GT Sport, you need to have a constant internet connection for most of the game to work and save. This, says Polyphony, is to curb cheating. Still, we'll sink some time into the online modes and update this review to reflect our experiences. Gran Turismo 7 isn't a departure, but rather a newer, shinier GT game. Its physics model is accurate, and while the racing can be formulaic, it's always a giggle. The attempt at humanity is a little bit cringy, the lack of up-to-date cars seems like an open goal missed, and the game may not have changed drastically, but that's not the worst thing in the world. There are medals to claim, cars to collect, and people on the internet to embarrass around Goodwood, the Ring, or well, anywhere really. PlayStation petrol heads are in for a good time.
viewers. I am Ivy the android. I'd like to share today's dinosaur forecast. A dinosaur outbreak will soon occur. Residents in the affected area have been evacuated, and a team of exo-fighters has been dispatched. A vortex warning has been issued. Please remain indoors.
I make sense of this situation.
You've been living back in the chief's records for 2 years.
All I wanted was to be IBS's top pilot.
IBS's latest dinosaur forecasts and exosuit technology were able to keep human casualties to zero. Exosuit development is proceeding under the guidance of the next-gen AI, Leviathan. Meanwhile, IBS continues to recruit candidates to become new exo-fighters, humanity's greatest hope. Another exo-fighter recruit, right? Welcome to IBS.
State of Play returns with more announcements and updates for your favorite games. We just saw the debut of Exo Primal, a brand new IP from Capcom. It hits PS4 and PS5 next year. Next up, let's get some eye-popping updates for some fan favorites launching soon.
で、来るんだろ一緒に。
Later today, visit PlayStation Store to download a new demo for Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. Now, let's jump into the world of Forspoken with some all-new gameplay.
It is quite beautiful.
Yeah, in a everything here wants to kill you kind of way.
You know I'm a world changer.
Let's finish this.
That was a new look at the sprawling PS5 adventure Forspoken from Luminous Productions. Let's check out some 6v6 action in Gundam Evolution, a fast-paced multiplayer shooter coming to PS4 and PS5 later this year. Kaiju Brawler Giga Bash comes to PS4 and PS5 later this year. Next, a fan-favorite fighting game makes a beautiful and bizarre return.
Yare yare って感じだわ。ここで決着をつける。オラオラオラオラオラオラ。
ストークラチナ、ぶっ飛びな。僕は回転の力を身につけたい。図に乗るんじゃねえぞ。どう？無駄無駄無駄無駄。遅いんだよ。脱出する。何の？オラオラオラオラ。覚悟はいいか。俺はできた。知れ者がにょエコーシャボン玉だ。今こそ好機。ここは私だ。私に策がある。オラが守るぞ。行くぞ。協力してやる。オラ久々先生。ストレッチハモン。罰の時間だ。流し込む。よくも惨殺処刑だ。チャリオッツ。ああ行くわよ。始末させてもらうぞ。
すべて超えてやる。そのまま眠りな。
てめえ
全力で
打ちかますぞ。
Our next two games will take you beyond life and death.
Trapped in an endless cycle. Fighting, dying, returning. Always the same, yet always changing. Astra, I'm not alone. Not anymore. Now I stand before the endless tower. I climb as Sisyphus did, pushing the boulder upward. No matter how high I climb, the challenge begins again. But I fight on, through the infinite. Seeking answers. Seeking King. Ascension. My release is within this tower, and I will find it.
Housemarque is bringing campaign co-op and a mysterious new survival mode to Returnal Ascension, a free update hitting this March. It's almost time to sign off, but before we do, let's get a first look at 2 brand new games coming from Square Enix.
Is this really what you want?
And you are certain that what we are doing is best for the people of the kingdom?
Yes. I suppose it would, in a sense. True. Yes. It made me wonder, am I still that same person?
The era of myths gives way to an era of great turmoil. The continent was ravaged by the devastating war between the Empire and the Alliance. However, one nation remained unaffected by the chaos. The Kingdom of Alatane. Ward of the Augurs, looked destined to have its soil stained with the blood of battle.
We've finally been called up. We're up against the Empire's main army.
We are to eradicate every last Imperial who comes ashore. Keep focused.
Come on, everyone!
And now you will die.
Do you really have such a yearning for war? I can't comprehend it.
So then, what shall we do now?
We're going to retake it.
This is our chance while they're all assembled. We should send our best and crush them.
That's right. All the more reason to avoid bloodshed.
It also likely means that we're in danger.
I suppose it is the only way for us to survive.
If the will to fight still lingers within you, then accept my offer and join me.
Valkyrie, heed my words. Ragnarok tears our world asunder. All we hold precious lies on the brink of annihilation. Become my tool of intervention and save this world from doom.
Your efforts to remain undetected are lacking. Reveal yourself. Who are you?
That's all for today. We'll see you soon with another State of Play.